people. We are live. Like we're actually
Now,
live
now we're
this
live.
time. So real quick, guys, real quick background. 3 minutes, 5 minutes. We're a little late, but that's because Kevin, this is his first podcast and he doesn't know what he's doing. And inevitably, when technology and Kevin are mixed, something goes wrong. Hence
Something goes
this.
haywire.
Something goes haywire, but we are here. You're not, doesn't matter because honestly, this is the first time I'm doing this. And I thought of sincerely nobody else I'd want to have a robust, wide ranging conversation about Web3 than you, Corrales, for specific
My
reasons.
man.
So,
Okay.
first and foremost, to introduce you just a bit, you're somebody I know that is not afraid to speak his mind and tell his opinions. And in that sense, you have a journalistic background, journalistic trained. I know you have a depth of understanding in the marketing and branding sphere. You've worked with clients such as Nike, Intel, the World Health Organization. And the main absolute reason why I'm having you on and want to speak to you today, because the way you think, dude. I love the way you think. I love the nuance to which you process ideas, and especially when it comes to Web3. And so, today I really want to harp on something that I didn't have to go far in research in terms of you and what you talk about and kind of your ethos of what you believe. It's literally in the title of your LinkedIn profile,
Yeah.
humanizing Web3. So so much of Web3 people believe is a technological evolution and revolves around the technology sphere. And that's one place and one space that I really try to educate and talk to people about. And I'll make this quick before my question. Me, for instance, I got into blockchain because of 2008 and the financial crisis that happened. And I saw what happened what happened to my folks' home and when it was taken. I saw what happened to people I loved when a lot of their world that they understood and knew changed drastically. And so I got into it because I wanted to understand money and finance, which led me to Satoshi Nakamoto, which is the creator of Bitcoin, his white paper, which led me to just next and next. And then, as we all know in Web3, there's rabbit holes. So, you know, so my question to you is, why do we even need to think about humanizing Web3? And how is Web3 more than just a technological evolution?
Whew. Thank you for the introduction, first of all, and being here. And awesome, awesome being here with you. Um, I think, I think to continue our conversation from probably NFT New York when we met for the first time, IRL.
Which was awesome.
Exactly. And I think that's a good leadway into what this all is about. So we might think I think we take a lot of things for granted in this today's world, like things like that, like, oh, it's a conference. So I went to a conference, but as we know, people in this space don't, almost nobody I know thinks like that. They think like there's something more here that we met that pulled us all together. And this is actually how I came to start to think in terms of human systems on top of blockchain. So like you've been in the game a lot longer than I have actually, but I came in 2017. So a lot of pre NFT stuff, but I was very interested in the social impact side and of blockchain, but things were just, very new then. I mean, they're still new, but it was even newer then. But I saw the potential. And I think that the big thing that, like a lot of, like I could go on and on about like what happened in 2017 in my perspective and all this, but rather than that, I would just say I'll skip ahead to like 2021 when NFTs came, because that was when I really believe like something new just exploded in blockchain, but it wasn't what people thought, and that was art. So I didn't see that coming, and I don't think a lot of people did. Um, and it was just that was how I think why it was so disruptive and powerful, because it was disrupting blockchain itself in a way that no one ever thought was going to happen. And I think the culmination, the result of what we're still in, I mean, it's all unfolding in real time, but is that NFTs, I really think are the human side, the people part of crypto. I think Mark Cuban actually said that first, and that's where I got it from, because I was like, yeah, that's kind of how I think too, because he called it was like last year he did some interview with Bankless DAO, and he was like that in DeFi's, the problem with DeFi's is that they don't understand community. So NFTs, that's why he started leaning towards NFTs, because he saw that as the leadway into building community for DeFi's. So from that, I really started really, piecing together a lot of things that I was involved in, like creator economy. That was my thing, like pre NFT and Web3. And I think creator economy is almost bigger. It's like the same scope as Web3. It's, you could say it's underneath it, or it's part of it. I don't know, or it's bigger. Some people, it just depends on how you're framing this. But in any event, you see this emergence of new economic kind of like people movement and economic models where it's like creator first. So we all know that that's not new, I don't think, but it's new where it's just exploding. And then you've got COVID on top of that. And now you've got crypto and Web3 all mixed in. These are all mixing in. And so the result is a lot of like creators who are not just monetizing, but are able to create crypto communities on top of the fact that they're monetizing. So it's a step, to me, it's like Web3 is a step further than creator economy, in the sense that we know it like going on to TikTok and, being a creator, and you make money and you build community, but those communities are not unlocked like in Web3, where when you attach crypto to that, that's what I call human economy. And that's where I think we are headed. We're already in it, but I don't think there's an understanding of what's really happening. And that's where it's fascinating to me what's happening, where these communities are like NFT communities, especially all across blockchain. I mean, any type of crypto community, they can unlock it, but most of them don't. And that's what that's what I feel like that's my role now, is to like educate on that. And the purpose is, my end goal is to interconnect communities into ecosystems. So it's like community is one thing, ecosystems are Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't go into Ethereum's Discord server. Ethereum is all around you, and Vitalik and the founders of Ethereum are out there on Twitter,
right,
talking about what can be. Now, it doesn't mean these are even doable, but that's how I think big things get built, is people go, I didn't know I could even think like that.
Yep.
And so to me, like that, again, like attaching a human understanding, a human values mapping onto blockchain is what I call kind of the true onboarding that people talk about, because it has the meaning and the depth.
Yeah.
And it's being done with NFTs, again, through art. But there's all kinds of new things that are going to emerge, where I think we're going to see actual human values that are being mapped through the blockchain through tokenization. So it's even, I'm in tokenized communities. Joe Pulizzi is a good one. If you don't know, he's the father of content marketing. And so you think, oh, well, when I got into his community early in 2021, I was like, I didn't even know I didn't know why he had a coin. So I was trying to figure out, like, he's content marketing god, and he's teaching content marketing.
Yeah.
But what does this coin have to do with it? I couldn't figure out what that thing is. Then I realized when I was in his community, and Joe, like, he's just a mentor to me. Like, he's just really an amazing guy. And you saw like how Joe is a good example where whether he did it or not, like aware in an aware way, it's how I viewed it, that he was tokenizing himself, all his past, like who he was. I mean, it's the tilt coin, right? They have this tilt
Yeah.
coin, so it's a community coin. So I mean, he's very modest, so he would say that's not me, that's all my community and my team and all that. But I mean, that's why people go into his, because he has built this reputation for being Joe Pelosi, right? Like he's a creator, and he's not just a creator, he's a kind of content educator, content marketing educator. And so what I learned a lot in that community was just that he was tokenizing himself on chain. And I found that, like, when I kind of came to that, I was just kind of like, how, I mean, am I dreaming? Like, this is
Yeah.
wild stuff. Like, this
Yeah.
is, but then when I started reading more about what tokenization really is, that's all it is. It's taking an asset in the real world and representing it on the blockchain.
Yep.
So art is tokenized and it goes onto the blockchain, and we can do the same with our humanity, I believe.
I think it's such an interesting concept, and it's and to pull a thread on that, you literally were on a Spaces yesterday in one form and fashion that I kind of want to take this, and that's music and NFTs.
Yeah.
Because I thought I had an inkling that maybe gaming would come first, and gaming would be kind of the medium with which people would understand creators and creatives, developers, so on and so forth. But I'm starting to think it might be music, actually. And so,
Yep.
yeah, you recently did a Spaces, and why music specifically is so interesting is because of what it means to our culture and what it means culturally. We have this unique place right now where creators and creatives that use their brain power to create something get very little of the proceeds of said creation. They have very little say over generally the direction in which these things go, how they're built, how they're marketed, how they're displayed. Generally, if you want any kind of success, because oftentimes you need to go with an entity like a Spotify, like an Apple Music. You need to use something like that. And so what happens then is, of course, as we know, in centralized services, they take the lion's share. They tell you what you need to do with your music, how you're going to market it, how maybe you should create your music. And so we're at this unique place where we have entities like Opulus on Algorand blockchain, Royal on
Mhm.
Sound XYZ on Ethereum, and all these different more decentralized mediums that are allowing creators to put their assets on the blockchain. So I personally
Yep.
am invested in Opulus, which does just that. And so what they are doing and what they are building is exactly that, a creator economy, somewhere where you
Mhm.
don't have to worry about a marketing budget, don't have to worry about all the friction that goes between you and your fans before they get to enjoy your creations. And so I'm curious about what you learned in your Spaces yesterday, and maybe what you already know in terms of how music and NFTs look like they're maybe the next source for where adoption will happen between kind of the human economy, creators, and NFTs.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm really, the more I get into music and start and talking to musicians. I was talking to Bruno. We had a great Zoom today. I don't know if some people know he's a great musician on LinkedIn, and he's all over the place. And we, that came off we had a great conversation just a few hours ago. And then yesterday I was in with Saint Reen, and he's a guy in Nashville, and he's just a really good storyteller. And we have a lot of great Zooms together lately. And the more we, talk about the convergence of music and what it means, it really makes sense in this framing of like human economics and how, I guess, the storytelling, the deep storytelling in one song. I mean, I really believe like one song can influence a DAO in a sense that the mission, because if you look at like, I think we talked about a little bit in the space yesterday, was if you look at a song and if you as a musician, if you wrote it, you're going to know all these movements, the story of the story that maybe it's some heartbreak song or whatever, but it's going to have these movements and it's going to have storytelling, and it's going to take you to a new place. Like almost every great song, you can listen to it many times, and sometimes it comes up with different messages depending on what you've lived through or whatever. So I can listen to something from 20 years ago and I'm enjoying it in a different way now. And I think that's what the big play in music is that it has this ability to go so deep into your, like, all of your senses and unlock, just like great art, any great art. But music is music. When you mix like music and art and even fashion and all these things, this is where I think you truly are going to see just massive experiential plays that matter, not just for the fun of it or the novelty, but that they're going to matter in a very human sense of innovation, creativity, the next phase of humanity, all that stuff. And I think it can be done through one song. Like, I think like when musicians are thinking, okay, because right away it's like pretty obvious, web3 can unlock a musician from a creator economy standpoint where they can monetize on a track. And I think this is like great. That's incredible. It will happen. It's going to happen. But I think that's just one sliver of what's like that. If you're just thinking that, that's not even a fraction of what we're going to see, where you're going to see unlocks in music's ability to heal, to transform. Maybe it represents a token. And so like when we think of tokenomics and communities, just like I think of like art, when art attaches onto a token, like take the Shiba coin. This, whether you think it's a scam or not, the point is somehow this meme that got started out in Reddit and pre Web3
I know where you're going with this.
You know what I mean? Starts to mix in the culture, and it's going all over the place. All of a sudden, it attaches to this coin for however that emerged, who knows? But something, and it was probably a joke at first. Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing.
We do like memes in Web3.
Yeah, but I mean, look at this is what's interesting. Like that story of Dogecoin, everyone, the creator himself, one of the co-creators, just thought it was the biggest joke in the world. He did it to make fun of all that, of Bitcoin, and he hated it. He hated crypto.
Still hates it.
Yeah, still hates it. But then here's what's powerful about Web3. The founder doesn't matter at some point.
No.
The founder, like Satoshi, no one even knows if the guy exists. So we don't need Satoshi.
Or if it's a guy, a girl,
we don't know.
No idea.
We have no idea, but we have the story of Satoshi, right? And that's the most powerful thing in crypto, is actually the story of, and again, these are very human, systems that, and getting back to Dogecoin, you see then Elon Musk, for whatever reason, again, says Dogecoin has value. The thing goes bonkers, and everyone's going, this is the nuts. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Well, guess what? Months later, Dogecoin got as much value as any token out there. It is as serious of an investment thing as Ethereum itself. I think it's really fascinating how we can't predict those things.
So another incredibly interesting part of what you're talking about, and the thread I'll pull to extend this conversation is what you're talking about is storytelling and narrative, right? That's what all this is, right? That's what commerce is based on. And for that record, commerce is what this is life, right? We live by commerce. We need things to live. We need water, food, a roof, clothes.
Yeah.
Commerce is just a part of daily life. But storytelling in Web3, you had this interesting post recently that really caught my eye, and it was discussing storytelling in NFTs, and it was like, let me give you two examples. You have your choice between choosing NFTs, A or B. A is, which for the record, I feel like you were talking about a company that I recruit for, but anyways, so A is a NFT that gives you access to exclusive Miami nightclubs. Shout out to 11's Crypto, and right, and so that would be awesome,
Yep.
right? Like I
Yeah.
love access to exclusive nightclubs. And then B is just a whole bunch of songs that have been unreleased and nobody's ever listened to. Like, which one would you want? And I was like, well,
Yeah.
I want the
Yeah.
exclusive nightclubs. But wait, because the story. Wait, let me tell you the story. Okay, the story behind the unreleased is that they're unreleased songs from Michael Jackson and Prince and Dada and Dada and da. Oh,
Yeah. Different now.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take the latter portion.
Right.
And so
Yep.
it just goes to that. It goes to that kind of Austrian economics value is subjective, right? And I truly believe that, and that's because of storytelling. And
Yeah.
so we can both listen to the same song and gather different responses, have different emotional responses and reactions because of our own life journeys, right? And so maybe you listen to a song and it gets you emotional because you can remember of a time of maybe somebody passing. Whereas for me, maybe I use it as a hype song before every basketball game, so I get hyped when
Right.
But it's all narrative based. Everything about Web3 is narrative based, NFTs, and so
Yeah.
and I'll get to my question here, but in terms of explaining this to people that want to understand what's an NFT, um, you know, it boils down to it being a token that's on a blockchain that's immutable, and that's really a story. And
Yep.
that's no different than the trading cards that you collected or the Beanie Babies or whatever it is. There was a story as to why, and it was
Yeah.
valuable to you, and that's all that matters. And
Right.
and that's kind of the stories of NFTs. So why do you think it is why do you think it is that people haven't attached to that narrative more? And how do you think we can bridge this gap to getting people to understand that the marriage between Web3 and storytelling?
Yeah. That's a big question. That's an awesome one. I like the way you frame that because yes, like why hasn't it attached? Well, I think like anything new, and not just new, but all across blockchain, I think we see it's not just new, it's revolutionary, and the NFTs are no different. Bitcoin, Ethereum, DeFi. These are all like we're talking about the most major revolutions that we've probably ever seen. Honestly, I mean, I really believe like the Bitcoin white paper is probably the most important document of all time. And I don't say that lightly because if you think about it, you're talking about for the first time ever an unlock. It's an idea, right? They all start out as ideas. But the idea behind that is that people can, for the first time in the history of civilization, have a power that anybody can basically all people can be the same, but now we know that that's not true. Like all people are not the same, but there is a now a technology that can allow pretty much anyone to have access that any centralized gatekeeper was responsible for protecting, and they can go through all of those things in banking, borders, government. It's massive. Like so, all things in blockchain I would consider like they're just massive revolutions. So how get to the NFTs? What does that mean for adoption? I think that they are not widely adopted because they're just not they're a novelty, and it is in the realm still of collectible just like Beanie Babies. So that
Yep.
typically isn't considered a serious sort of effort. But what I think that really that people don't get yet is that that's, again, these are just slivers of what's possible. And with the NFT, like I think of NFTs as our civil rights and blockchain as our human rights. And I think that's an interesting framing, because when you do that, when you put it like that, and the reason I say that is because I heard this interview with Nadia of Pussy Riot
Mhm.
early on. They were very early into doing, like, even before Beeple dropped, they were doing, like, they were already utilizing their art on the blockchain. And that's because, if anyone knows that story,
She's a
they
boss. I love her story.
yeah. So, and this is like, this is what I think really people need to understand about the cultural part of the movement. So this is not like, I wouldn't even consider, I think this is where the culture always leads the tech, because you can't possibly know the use cases until you see
Yep.
people usually in trouble. So in that story, she's jailed in, I think, 2012 for, speaking her mind. Classic kind of authoritarian state thing. They put him in jail. So what does she do? Well, they get their bank accounts frozen, for one thing, because they're starting to get some fame from that. Russia says, the Russian state says, frozen bank account. So now what? So that's how all throughout civilization, that's how it's always done.
Absolutely.
That's
Friction.
just how it's done. They have a centralized government or agency who comes in and freezes things, scares them, ruins their image, characters, the whole thing. Well, what she did, what they did as a group, is they said, "Hey, let's turn to this new thing, this Ethereum, where we can subvert the central banking in Russia. We can make money off our art." And now, this is the thing that I think people should understand this. That's just the beginning, because it's the story that carries through, where when they're doing that, they're also telling the story of human, the just the absolute desire to be free as a human, because that's just, so the money part and the transaction is just the story to leading up to the humanity.
No, I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
Like sincerely. At the crux of this, and not to get too like heavy here, but at the crux of this, I mean that's why Satoshi wrote it. That's why we have the first blockchain. Freedom from central authority, freedom from
Yeah.
those that would like to take things away. Instead of just living out our lives the way we like. That's an interesting part of this, and again, to kind of like pull on a thread there to kind of to move that forward. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, and actually, I think you wrote about this recently. I wrote about this recently. The transactional nature of Web3.
Yeah.
I get for the better half of my time in Web3, all I've talked about for the most part are numbers and bears and bulls, and where liquidity is going, who has TVL locked, um, uh,
Yeah.
yield farms. Everything is around
Yeah.
the financial technology that is blockchain. And so going back to our first kind of part about this and humanizing Web3, I really want us to get away from that, because it misses the forest for the trees. Yes, 100%. This was created blockchain. Well, blockchain is incredibly old technology, by the way. But why it was created from Satoshi was absolutely to help those things. Why? And I forget her name now, but from Pussy Riot did what she did
Mm-hmm.
was because exactly freedom from central authority.
Yeah.
How can we? Number one, why do you think it is that we focus so much on the number aspect, the transactional nature of Web3, whether our protocols are up or down, whether we're making money or not. And because when I talk about Google and Facebook and Alphabet or whatever, I don't ever bring up their stock price. I don't ever bring up how well they're doing in the market. I just talk about the social, the political, the cultural aspects. How can we get to that place in Web3 where that's the focus, that's what we're talking about, and it's not about the transactional nature of what we're doing?
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought that's an interesting point, because we typically think of Web 2 as being this greedy kind of place that, but it's true. Like when you talk about Google or Amazon, Nike, Apple, you're usually not talking about their price, but maybe their next generation products or Tesla or whatever. So that's interesting. Yeah, I think that. Well, yeah, I think we can take a lot of knowledge from that and cues of what to do.
Well, do you mind if
Yeah.
I pull on that right quick,
Yeah.
just on that point right there, because I think you have something there. Do you think it is because they have products that have been that make sense to consumers, and so therefore you're not focused on the money aspect, where for us we don't really have that product or service to where adoption has been so grand that it just makes sense? Do you think that's why?
Yeah, I think that's on the right track. I think products are simply a result of your why, I would say. So like if you look at, say, Apple's a good example that, like Sinek talks about this, like in his famous book, the about your why. And he puts out this very interesting case, and he says all of these companies, and this goes back, to the Wright brothers. It's not just companies; it's people who created something that revolutionary, and they they had a why that represented more of a movement than a company or a product. So Apple, if you go way back in time, they started out basically as a movement.
Yep.
That this was not a product. Products, look at all the crappy products Apple has put out. Like it's not like they got a bunch of zingers. Most of their time was a bunch of rugs. You could call them rugs even.
100%.
Google. So everyone, I think, understands this kind of what I call it, like creative destruction. Like you're just creating things and then you're destroying. They get destroyed so that you can be better. But I think that, I guess, to get to your point, like what they're good at, what they've been good at, is that first of all they just understand marketing so much more than Web3. I think Esther Katz put out an interesting post the other day, and she's like that. In talking to a lot of Web3 founders, she realized that so blockchain L1s who are trying to to appeal to founders.
Yeah.
The problem is that they're usually led by very tech heavy kind of teams, and they don't quite understand. I'm not going to say like they don't understand the human part of it. I just think that they 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 the
That's not the
assumption
main
is that
focus.
the assumption is, well, this tech speaks for itself. It's so revolutionary. It speaks for itself. So then when
They'll
she
just
said the
understand.
founders,
Yeah.
right? So but who they're appealing to are founders who are non-technical usually. So when it's a mismatch of, like, it's basically like a bad marketing problem. Like they don't know their audience, so that
That's
they
right.
they say, the L1 kind of founders go, hey guys, look, we've got this incredible, and they go into all these details. Here's our white paper. Here's our roadmap. And then the non-technical founder who's going to eventually bring that to market,
Yep.
they're sitting there going, I don't get it.
Yeah.
So now they've missed. That's the big problem, I think, that you could probably assign to almost every. It happens in NFTs. It happens in and NFTs. I think are interesting because the misunderstanding is not the technology; it's the community.
Yep.
I think they misunderstand the power of what the community can do.
Yep.
Or interconnected communities into other NFTs together. That's what I think they're missing right now.
I think your earlier point was perfectly succinct for this. You don't need
Yeah.
decentralization until you need decentralization, right? So,
Yeah.
so for us here in America and the United States, not America because we're South America, but us here in North America, decentralization might not make sense. And so I've talked to a lot of L1 founders, and there's actually, the technology, the L1 that I am most looking forward to is Algorand. Algorand is this pure proof of stake, and they're run by a gentleman named Silvio Macaulay, who is the godfather of cryptography. Vitalik Buterin and Satoshi Nakamoto, they reference his writings from the 80s and 90s in terms of building their blockchain, right? And so Algorand, they have the best tech bar none, let me say. And I mean that. They have the best tech out there bar none. But in no way, shape, or form does that matter to 98% of people. And so when their Algorand Foundation was going through explaining this, they're like, well, the technology speaks for itself. The technology speaks for itself. I was like, well, that's interesting, because I want you to speak about why the technology does not speak for itself. I want you to explain how it incorporates people. Because if not, because I think you're forgetting that your end product is a human being. It is not a computer, right? We are made up of chromosomes, not zeros and ones, right? So we have feelings and emotions, right? And so tying this in to we have about 10 more minutes. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I want to discuss something that I recently heard you talk about that got me extremely interested and curious about what you're building. And that's called Brand New Voices. Now, so let me get, so I know some, I don't. I heard you recently call it a federation. Number one, cool word. I mean, I know, I have an idea, but I want to hear what that is. But I heard you speak about it being a federation, kind of a conglomeration of different, like content creators. Well, actually, you know what? Let me not.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you're building with Brand New Voices, and what did you mean when you called it a federation? Let's do that.
Yeah, no, thank you for letting me chat on that. It's right now, I mean, it's in the federation is sort of the dream state of where I want it to be, because that's hard to do. Building a federation is not easy, it turns out. And so, it's kind of like, I think of it like you could call it the Star Trek model of like Federation of Planets. That's kind of really,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's how I really think of it. I'm such a Trekkie that I was like, why don't I just do a Star Trek thing? I'm such a maxi anyway of that. And so really that's what it's about, is like, because what I love about Star Trek is that I think it's very in current for right now, because Star Trek is about exploration. They don't have, when the Enterprise goes out, they don't know what's ahead. All they know. So you could kind of say, like in a Web3, what's their value? Like what are they doing? These people just prancing around the galaxies? Where's the utility in this? Right? This is how Web3 is. So they're explorers, and so they have to, and in the show even, they have to defend their exploration to, let's say, more military compounds that have, more applications for certain applications in the military sense. That's more understandable. But the explorer is not. It's just not a tangible product, service. You don't know what's the value. And so this is what's interesting about that show. When I really look at like kind of Web3 like that. We are all sort of explorers, and we don't, I think it's really people who say they know what's coming. It's always a big joke when someone says they can predict what's going to happen. Like, dude, you're just, I don't care how much knowledge of, like, don't get me wrong, like, you're really smart in your knowledge of this, and this, but the reality is we are in a whole new realm of humanity and exploration, and that's the way it should be to me. Like, so I don't, yeah, I won't lie. Like I sit around going like, what am I doing? Like what the f am I doing? I'm saying all this shit, but I don't really know. But what I do know is I have this vision,
Yep.
and I know a lot of people, more people I talk to share that vision, like yourself, that this idea of federated models of decentralized communities, which could be called worlds, and
Mm.
that is my vision where the really big unlocks, I look at it a lot like Ethereum, where the unlock in Ethereum isn't that they had even utility. You could argue Bitcoin still doesn't have utility to this day, right? You could make that argument. And so what how did it become the fastest asset growth in history though if it has no utility? That makes no sense. It must have. Is everyone is in a collective dream? Maybe we're but you could say this about the history of money, the history of the establishment of the U.S. borders.
Right.
Is there a physical border when I go from Oregon to visit you in Washington State? Is there like this giant
Force field.
border where, yeah, no, there's not. It's just a story. It's like, oh, I crossed over into Washington. How do you know that? Oh, I mean, there's the sign. The
I
sign
love it.
says I'm in Washington. Like, so, we've built all of society like this. So I think it's beautiful. Like the brand new voices is about, really what it's about is the emerging voices that we haven't heard and have been voices of oppression, honestly, and diversity that we absolutely need in Web3. um, that's really the most important, I think, takeaway of what it is that I'm trying to do, is that this is about um, unlocking, especially people who were shut out of Web 2
Mm.
already. So that's why, like, I'm working a lot with Marie Roker Jones, who a lot of people know, and she's forming, and a few of MJ and some of those folks are forming this uh, Black women of Web3 community, because this is really where I see the most value that I can bring, is be a supporting system to those voices that they need. They don't just, it's not onboarding, I think, is not the right word. It's more like, what do you want the internet to be? And now we will, the more we group together as a sort of federation or individual communities that are joined, we will find that pathway. That's kind of what it is, and that's where the most value is going to be, looking at people who are shut out even of Web 2 and bringing them in a way that is not where that you're not saying, okay, now you're going to learn blockchain, you're going to learn NFT, smart contracts. That will come. I don't really have any doubt. Like, those things are educational. They're necessary for education of the space, obviously, but they are not what drives the true, like, the beating heart is not the smart contract. It's not blockchain. It's the people, and I know you talk about this a lot. It's the people who are doing the thing, using that stuff, and then what are they doing with it? And that's where I think it's really important to understand, like, the diversity is really, really important, because if it's not, um, what's going to happen is that when you have a bunch of non-diverse systems, blockchain is literally built for diverse operations with, composability. All that stuff
Ooh.
is really about
Yeah.
diversity. And my Marie is doing something really interesting, where she's redefining DEI as decentralized equity inclusion in Web3, because the decentralization has to do with identity diversity and neurodiversity of people.
Ooh.
That's the interesting part, where it gets really fascinating, I think. And that's where the meaning is going to come from, I believe.
Man, every time I talk to you, I have such a thought process going on right now. So, I
Likewise.
wrote down as you're talking, unlocking human potential and how to manipulate the internet in your favor. And and so, and again, I don't want to take too much of more of your time here,
No,
but
I'm just trying to get away from this sun. Go
well, I
ahead.
did want to speak on to what you said because it's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's rewriting the wrongs of the past. And I'm huge on diversification because of my upbringing, because I grew up as the minority in my group of black men and women. My two godsons are will be productive black men in this world. And so it's uberly important for me to grow this space in a way that's representative of our population at large, right? And the decentralized portion, the pseudo anonymous, the anonymous pieces of this space is kind of what I truly love. And I know there's some of that getting away, but for people that don't understand, what it means to look different, to be different, and how that impacts you in this society, you don't understand.
Yeah.
But if you get to speak to these people, then maybe you have an inkling, maybe you have a thread that you can pull where things make sense. So for me, it's so important that me as a recruiter, recruiting for Web3, that I'm putting people in place that not only have the conviction, but also have the thought process, the look, the feel, the care and concern for what we're trying to build here. It's not a financial technology, but it is. But first and foremost, the story is humans. The human, like you say, the human economy, human economics.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing we didn't get to touch on today that I'd love to bring you back, the human art chain. Um, um, yeah, I mean, just humanizing all of this. Man, I'm sorry. You gave me such a thought process on the end.
No.
I was going to wrap up so cleanly.
No,
But,
and
but
I'm
no,
just I'm just listening to your beautiful words about that. That's what you're doing is, I think, really, really important in that context, especially of bringing, because it's the same thing. We have the same objectives, like that's the same thing I'm doing. It's just like the diversity is super important. And I don't like, actually, I kind of, the ethical part of diversity is sort of, I'm starting to kind of take a position like that. We have to get beyond that. It's, there's no doubt about it. Like we should always be talking about the ethics. But
right.
What I think is really fascinating is when we start to talk about neurodiversity and match that up, because they're ultimately connected. Like if
100%.
I'm looking a certain way, I mean, I grew up in, small town Montana with a half Asian background. But most people just said like, oh, he's some sort of, I don't know if he's Chinese or what. Like they don't, half my friends didn't know, they didn't even know like where the Philippines, they didn't know it was a country.
Right.
Like, like, and that's, these are good, they're good guys, but I grew up like that. And there were times when the ignorance came out of people that, just didn't like me. They just did stuff. Right. So, I think where I'm going with that is that, our neurodiversity and how we think is connected to our identity. So, women have a different way of thinking because they're shaped in a different way in the world.
Biologically different, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's not like, so I think that it's an interesting thing to think in the end. Like, I really think like there's a strive to get towards the neurodiversity is what ultimately matters the most, because we're seeing the emergence of so many different identity diversities that we can't, there's just so many of them, even in subsections. Like I used to go. I was in Clubhouse, a couple of years ago, and it was a group of Black disabled queer people. So this is like holy. Like I didn't even know, first of all, that like this is so many, going to, like, wow. And it was so fascinating how they were talking, like that they weren't welcome. They didn't feel welcome in the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not to say they didn't like the Black Lives Matter, but they were like, it doesn't speak to us.
For sure.
And I was like, damn, but yet they're Black, and they were saying things like, that doesn't mean we are big supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
We're just saying that we're going to strive in our way to bring awareness to the diversity, even inside of that diversity. So, I think it's a really complicated thing to unpack, and in the end, you probably end up at neurodiversity, and this is what I love about blockchain, because blockchain respects the composability of diverse systems to build, and if we can build things together with different diversities, maybe we can find a mapping with the technology to the human in a way that's just never been thought possible.
Dude, we're gonna have to do this again, because I have to run in. I have to get 2 little
Right,
rug mats at school. But composability. Yeah, I am not a fan of monolithic structures. I'm really a fan of really, and if anybody that's a little more technical understands what I'm saying in terms of microservices.
Even I love that post that you did. Yeah.
Even a service-oriented architecture, but something that's built independently, but pulls on these different threads. I mean, even in marketing, you can think of a center of excellence, where you have this kind of this middle foundation, but everybody's pulling resources and helping each other for the ultimate goal. That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Wow. It's only awesome, oh my God. I wish we could do this so much more. I would absolutely love to bring you back. I can't believe this is my first podcast. This went so well, dude. Thank you so much. I sincerely do. Every time we talk, I'm either goosebumps, learn something, and today it was both goosebumps and learning something. So thank you for that. Thank you, anybody that actually was at home and watching. Appreciate you guys. Gonna try to continue to bring on interesting and awesome guests like Corrales. And so once again, dude, thank you so much. Thank you at home. Appreciate you. Let's do this again.
Thanks, my friend. Cheers.
All right, dude.